So welcome everybody. We're excited to have you on this crash course called Zero to Launch, where today we're going to cover essentially how to go from getting an idea for the startup and taking it all to the finish line and launching a successful company. So today we have 4 experts that gathered to share the knowledge with you, anything from building MVPs, branding and design, go-to-market strategy, and sales. So, and while people joining in, if you could post in the chat a little bit about yourself, just 1 or 2 lines about the startup you're building and also what stage of the startup you're in, ideas phase, prototype, MVP, maybe growth and traction. So it would be helpful for us to understand where everybody at. So, all right, George, could you
let's jump
skip
in
to the next one? Awesome, great. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Lena Levine. I'm a founder and CEO of a software development agency called Forcoda. We work with Fortune 500 companies and startups, helping them to build MVPs that resonates with their customers and based on the customer market research to make sure that they resonate with end users.
All right. On my end, my name is Jonathan Pippick. I'm the founder and CEO of Blue Manta Consulting. We are a go-to-market consultancy for B2B SaaS startups, specifically seed to Series C. And we help these startups with go-to-market strategy and execution. So everything from ICP and personas, position and messaging, pricing and packaging, so on and so forth, to help them maximize their success in the market. Tyler?
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Tyler Derman, and I'm the founder and CEO of Ignition Growth Consulting, where I help B2B SaaS startups do everything in growth marketing from getting their first campaigns launched to measurement and analytics. So very excited to talk about all this stuff today. George?
Hey everybody, George Little here. I'm the founder of BrandsApp. It's a B2B micro agency that helps startups through sort of Series C companies revamp their brands and relaunch their marketing websites with a particular focus on kind of business to business. So yeah, thanks all for joining us. I'll pass it back to Lena to kick us off.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. So what we're going to cover here today in the next 50 minutes is the idea for the business that we came up with just for this workshop to demonstrate how we can take an idea for a real world problem and take it through different stages and validate it as we go along. So could you go to the next slide, George? Perfect. So we've got an idea for this amazing startup that we called Pets R Us. And the idea is that we, since we have all these amazing experts on our team that combine expertise from 4 different industries, it's like a perfect combination for bringing the ideas to launch. So we came up with an idea called Pets R Us that was solving the problem of helping startups connect with their potential customers at the conferences. So we all go to a lot of different conferences. They get to be tedious, right? And if you have a booth at an event, it's very difficult to bring people to your booth, right, to get them engaged. So our idea was that by helping startups rent out pets and cats, they can use that to attract more people to their booths, to get the conversation started about their company, while people enjoy spending time, looking at birds or petting cats. So can we go to the next slide, please?
Yeah, this is obviously a great idea for a business, by the way.
Yes, so we're going to get there. Is it a great idea? That's, part of the process for us to discover. So, and the problem that we were trying to solve with this, idea is helping address actually I jumped forward. The initial idea was that we helping startups to rent out pets to bring them to the office for the employees to actually engage with them, and just as a fun way to boost the employee morale, productivity, also help startups and companies to stand out from other companies by providing this benefit, and also help to with adoption rate of pets, because it's, there are a lot of pets in the shelters, and we want to assist them finding the loving home. So, and our mission was to improve the morale, productivity in the workspace culture by connecting startups and employees with those adorable pets. So, and the solution that we came up with was creating this rental for cats and birds to provide to the companies. So so the first step, right, we have this idea like in real world. So now we have to ask ourselves questions. How good is this idea, right? The step number one that we need to accomplish is to confirm our assumptions, because ideas is all just that, right? We have an assumption that this is going to work and it's going to be the next billion-dollar company, but until we go and talk to the customers, until we take it to the market, it's just an assumption. And it's very dangerous to build companies and businesses based on assumptions, because real world is very different from what you envision in your head. So, and if you're asking me, how can we go and validate those assumptions? Well, the process is, there is a formula to that process. So the step number one is you always want to go and talk to your prospective customers, right? You want to go and talk to them, not just, Google stuff on the internet, which can be helpful, part of the research, but the most important insights that you're going to uncover when you talk to your customers one-on-one. And there are 5 questions that you want to uncover when you talk to the people, right? I know a lot of founders, they go and they just want to get a feedback about the idea, like, do you like this? Are you going to pay for it, right? And it's very dangerous. Those are very dangerous questions to ask, because you might get a false positive feedback from your potential customers. So what we need to discover, what are the problems right now, right? Because the problem that you might be focusing on actually might not be the top problem for your customers. We also want to understand, is the problem a high priority problem for the customer, right? Because if your house on fire and you selling somebody the lawn maintenance service, right, they're not going to be listening to you. They will be calling 911. So we also want to understand how your customers try to solve the problem in the past and how, because that will be a clear indicator if they're already in that solution finding, if they're in the buyer mindset. And if they are, that will be a great indicator that these customers will be those early adopters looking for the solution, and they will be your early customers. And also we want to understand whether they have desire to buy the solution and whether they have money to pay for the solution. So in this case, right, as we were exploring this idea with the startups, we discovered that they actually don't really have any money to, invest into this, service to boost the morale for their team, because they really focused on spending all their money to get traction and get, product out of the door, get in front of the investors, raise the next funding. And this was, boosting employee morale was not really a huge problem for the startups, because it's a small team. Everybody, already bought an idea. They're all excited building together. So the morale is not an issue, right? So after exploring this idea, after exploring this idea and talking to the customers, we turned out that startups were actually not a good target audience for us, because they didn't have a need, they didn't have money, so it would be impossible for us to sell them on this product. So we had to pivot. And we also discovered that birds and cats were very high liability, and it would be very difficult for us to bring them into the offices. So based on the conversation that we had, right, we talked to the startups, we talked to enterprise clients, we talked to the conference goers, we discovered that dogs, enterprise customers, and conferences had this perfect combination. They had money to pay, right? Those big corporations had money. They had a need to attract customers at the conference, and it was a high value problem, right? Because you go to an event, you may be paying $5,000 for the booth, and you need to find a way to stand out from hundreds, 200 other vendors at the conference. So bringing puppy to your booth is a perfect lead magnet, and everybody wants to play with the puppy, and you can pitch those customers on the idea while they're playing with the puppy. So, and the insight from this. We ended up solving the same problem here, connecting shelters, right? Like the dog shelters with potential, companies and potential increasing rate of adoption. But now we change the vision and we change the path how we're going to solve that problem just by talking to the customers. So now that we have a better understanding of the market and who our customers are, what we can do, we can put together the proof of concept to further validate that idea, right? So, and with MVP development, it doesn't have to be crazy, fully built out solution that you're going to present to your customers. I see startups doing this all the time, right? They invest so much money and resources building something that's like very durable, which is, it can be also very risky because your idea is going to evolve. So you want to start with something that's small, right? You can start with even no-code prototypes, like design in Figma, for example. You can even use put together a solution out of the existing tools, like you can leverage Typeform, Google Spreadsheets, Zapier, emails, or you can use a little bit more robust tools like WordPress, no-code tools like Bubble, Flutterflow. But if you're feeling ambitious or if you have those technical skills, right, you're a software engineer, you can build a custom, web application using, for example, React, Node.js, which is the industry standard. And here I have the breakdown of the expected cost between different solutions that you should plan to invest into the prototype. So with the Figma designs, if it's just, let's say you're designing just like a couple of features for your MVP, you can expect to invest between 5,000 to 10,000 into your clickable prototype. If you're using no-code tools like Bubble, you can expect to invest between 10 to 20,000. And if you're building a custom MVP, which will be more robust and you have working product, you should be looking at about $50,000 to $100,000 to invest into your MVP. So, and here I have a few different tools that my team and I love to leverage: Figma, Typeform, Flutterflow, Bubble, Airtable, and Zapier. That allows us to create a lot of proof of concepts for our clients very, very quickly. So, and one thing you need to remember, MVP doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the most polished, product out there. And like, I know a lot of us, are detailed oriented people and we love things to be perfect, but MVP and proof of concept is not that stage where you have to be obsessing with the details. As long as it's good enough and as long as you can demonstrate the idea to your customers clearly, so that way they can understand what exactly you're building, how it works, right? They can play around with it, click on it, and experience it. That's all it takes. And then again, based on that feedback, you can make those adjustments as you go along. So, and one thing that's important to keep in mind here is during this step, as you, again, refining your idea for the product, is user testing. And don't skip this step, because while you're going through your customer research, right, when you started talking to your customers, now you have a proof of concept, now you're doing user testing. What you're doing, you not only getting feedback from your customers, not only you refining your product and increasing the quality of your MVP, but you're also building relationships with those potential customers that might buy your product down the line, those early adopters that I mentioned earlier, right? So it's a very important step, and I see a lot of founders skipping customer research step, right? They skip the user testing step and they think, oh, we're going to get the feedback once we launch and once we start selling. But the danger of that is that it might be too late to get the feedback by the time you launch. Let's say you invested 100K in MVP, you started showing it to the customers, and the feedback that you get is that you have to go and rebuild it because it does not align with your customers at all. Now you 100K out, and you still have to invest more money to build new features and change it up. And on the idea phase, right, when you talk to the customers, when you in a prototype mode, it's much cheaper and faster to make those changes. And it's very important not to skip that step. So, and you also get to build your backlog of the features. And also, it's great to start identifying what metrics you need to track as you, again, talking to your customers and you're building your proof of concept. Again, I see a lot of startups that launch the products and they don't track any data. So you want to include Google Analytics tracking, Hotjar tracking, so you can see what people doing on your screen. And we also love the customer IO tool, so you can also track what people doing within your app. And here are the few KPIs that you can track that are important, such as cost per acquisition of the customer, conversion rate, churn rate, right? How often, like how many people leave your product, also your average revenue per user, and net promoter score, so showing how much your customers love your product. So, okay, I think that's, yeah, so, John.
All right, thanks, Lena. So now that we've kind of covered the MVP process, the metrics you want to track, how to actually build the MVP, right? It's good to think through the go-to-market strategy as part of this, because like Lena mentioned at the beginning, you're doing that research to figure out, well, are birds and are cats really the right avenue to start with? Are startups the right target audience? And what you realize in that initial research is they're not, right? So what we've done is we've pivoted, right? So Pets R Us now has shifted focus to Fortune 500s. Why? Because like Lena said, they have the money, they have the budget to be able to afford our services. We've shifted to dogs because they have less liability. I know nobody is shocked to hear that dogs are actually trainable, cats and birds not so much. So we're focusing on dogs. And then specifically, we need to start thinking through, okay, what are the types of companies and the types of personas we want to target? In this case, Fortune 500s, not just Fortune 500s, but also just large companies, right? Over $50 million in revenue. You want them to be in really conference heavy industries. Why? Because we are providing these dogs for conferences to differentiate these booths, right? To attract folks to these companies' booths. With that, you really want an event team that probably has like 3 or more people. They probably do like 20 events or more a year. And the really critical part is that they have to get 10% or more of their leads from industry trade shows and conferences. So when you think about the problem that we're solving, our ICP and persona research found that the key problem that these event marketers face is that conferences are just boring. Like they are, right? On top of that, you're in the sea of booths where you have like 300 booths and you have to come up with unique ideas to get these prospects to your booths. You're looking for anything you can to draw these people in. And the other problem we saw was there's low dog adoption rates, right? If you go to a pound, there's so many dogs waiting to get adopted. So it sounded like we could kind of solve 3 different problems. 1, differentiating the booths. 2, drawing people in and getting those leads or those badge scans for those event marketers. And 3, kind of overcoming that conference boredom. So now that we kind of have this idea of who we're targeting and what problem we're solving for, everything else really cascades from there. So it's really helpful to start thinking through at this point, who's your competition? So if the problems we solve are conference boredom, differentiating the booth, and drawing people in, we need to think obviously of direct competitors, right? So direct competitors, we did a little bit of research. We found a dogs for rent company in Pittsburgh. They're only located in one specific city. They really do this not for conferences, but just kind of for fun, for local events. So they're not really a huge competitor. So that's a good thing. But in this case, you also need to think about substitutes. So when you think about substitutes, again, if our job's to be done is drawing attendees to the booth, what else does that? If you've been to a conference, at some point you've smelled popcorn and been like, man, I am hungry. And you go straight to that booth. So popcorn is one of those substitutes that's going to compete with our dog renting service. Same thing with consoles, right? Or any other kind of, expensive kind of prize like that, right? If someone has a PS5, people are going to stop by. They're excited to win that prize. So again, you got to think about who your competition is. And along with that, the next piece is you have to think through pricing. So when it comes to pricing, you really need to consider the value that we provide. So we're not just providing, dogs for rent. What we're really doing is bringing additional leads to these companies. So, if we can bring in, let's say, making up numbers, 15% more leads than traditional alternatives like popcorn or an expensive console, you really have to think through the value if you're thinking about value-based pricing. So for super easy math, let's just say that 15% means 15 more leads. Let's say 33% of those leads close and the average deal size is 30 grand. That means that for one industry conference, we're generating roughly, what is that, like 150K in revenue for our customers. That means it's not really that unreasonable to charge a conference rate of 10 to 15 grand for a 3-day conference to rent, 3 dogs, have a pen there, have a handler taking care of them, obviously giving them water, breaks, food, monitoring their stress from, let's say, 8 to 6, right? 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. is probably like a standard kind of conference time. Obviously, we can't just go with intuition. We would do pricing research with prospects to figure out what pricing is reasonable. We'd also test our pricing and sales conversations, see how our prospects react, see what lands, what doesn't, so on and so forth. So we've got our ICP, we figured out the problem we solved, we've taken a look at competition and pricing, and now we really need to start putting all this together in terms of positioning and messaging, right? We need to make sure that our prospects understand the pain points we solve. And again, this should be based on customer research. For positioning, we want customers to think of us as a way to solve their problems. In this case, attracting more leads, overcoming conference boredom, differentiating their booths, so on and so forth. We really want to be in their consideration set. So when they think popcorn or expensive console, they think dogs are us. The other thing is on the messaging side, we want them to identify, we're still on the previous slide. We want them to identify the keywords and phrases and terms that our prospects use, right? We want to embed those in our website and collateral copy, even the words our sales reps use. Again, if I had to make this up off the top of my head, I'd probably say our position is that we're a dog rental service that's designed to attract more prospects to event booths for large companies and competitive industries. And our messaging would really go into more detail and explain that our friendly dogs make even the most uptight corporate bros smile, let down their guard, and come over to the booth. So position messaging is great, but you really have to turn that into a compelling narrative. So for Pets R Us, it probably goes something like this. To the next slide. Yep. So conferences are boring. Booths all look the same. So every quarter you come up with a more exciting prize or benefit, like a raffle for the latest console or free popcorn to lure people in. Over time, it gets harder and harder to meet your lead or badge scan quotas. And we totally get that. That's why we designed a dog rental service that helps event marketers boost booth leads by 15 to 30%. We rent you the cutest, happiest dogs you can imagine to draw on your prospects, eliminate conference boredom, and help you destroy your quotas. Yep, so you can see the dogs rolling around in the cash. Hopefully that's what they lead to for you. So we figured out our sales pitch. We still need to figure out how to acquire customers. So for that, we need to start doing some growth marketing. So I'm going to turn over to Tyler to walk us through that.
Awesome. That's great. I appreciate you going into everything, Lena and John, because this is really the foundation that's required to get in place before we start doing growth marketing. We need a good product. We need to know who our customers are, and we need to know how to talk to them. And then now we got to talk about how to bring that message to market and start going to market. So let's talk about that. What does that actually look like? How do you start doing growth marketing in a smart way and start acquiring your customers? I like to think of it as growth marketing is more like acting like a scientist rather than running on the marketing hamster wheel. So if you're running on the marketing hamster wheel, what that looks like is a lot like this guy on the left-hand side, where we're just doing more stuff. We're doing more LinkedIn ads. We're doing more event sponsorships, social posts, blogs, videos. We're just doing a bunch of stuff, but we haven't stopped to think about how do we measure it? Is it the right thing to do? Is our audience there? Or is any of this working? And so you end up on this path where you're just running really hard and feeling like you're doing a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, if you hit your goal, you don't know why. You don't know which of those things mattered and what to do next again. And if you didn't hit your goal, you feel terrible because you did all this work. What happened? How did it work? Where did it go? And so I like to think about marketing as a science where you're thinking about the scientific method. How do we use hypotheses to say, if we do this experiment, this is what a success criteria looks like, so that we can measure the experiment and be effective when we bring our stuff to market and say if it worked or didn't. And so in the next slide, the right thing to think about with measurement is I like to think about how do you break down your measurement in terms of the business goal, which we'll call lagging indicators, since it takes a while to close a deal. In our sales process for Pets R Us, it probably takes somewhere from 30 to 90 days to close a deal. So let's say it takes that long to close a deal and get revenue in the business. That's going to be our lagging indicator. And this graphic we're looking at here is from a company called Spiro, where they build testing and experimentation programs, but they have an output as part of that process of having a goal tree map that allows you to take your business goal and map it out all the way down to the very first metrics you get from your first campaign. So if we were to go through that process live together, let's take the business goal of getting revenue in the business. That's a lagging indicator because it takes a while to get, but we have to do activities like run marketing campaigns to be able to get leading indicators such as views, clicks, and engagements on our ads, for if we're using an ads example, to run programs that will eventually turn into revenue later. And so if you have things like your lagging indicators is revenue, your leading indicators are your program going to market and working, like impressions, engagements, and clicks. Well, there's also an intermediate step that is important, like converting leads on a form that are qualified or getting meetings for your sales team. I like to refer to those as key performance indicators for our experiments, so that you have three types of metrics that you're measuring your campaigns against. You have your leading indicators, which is our thing working or not? Are people engaging with our ads, social posts, seeing our blogs, that kind of stuff? Then the key performance indicators are they working? Are they converting leads? Are those leads taking meetings with us? And then did the whole program work? Is it driving revenue at the end of 30, 60, 90 days? So that's how I think about measurement. And so on the next slide, something else that's really important to think about when you're building your first backlog of experiments is, instead of just kind of guessing or shining a flashlight in the dark of deciding where to spend your time, spend your money, trying to find event marketers in our case, let's do the work of talking to them and asking them where they hang out. Who are the influencers they talk to? What are the podcasts they listen to? Where are the events that they go to? What trade shows and or private events do they prefer? And so when we get this information from our target audience, we can use that to generate insights and use those in our experiments that we'll test and say, okay, well, we're not just starting from scratch. We know for sure our audience is hanging out here, so let's start doing experiments there. And so when we do that, and we think about things like on the next slide, like when we actually have a place that we know we're going to go find event marketers, what are we going to offer them? I like to think of offers and CTAs as gifts we're giving to people, because it's not a gift to say, hey, do you want to take a demo of my product, or do you want to buy it? That's kind of a selfish way to think about how you build your relationship with your customer. So when you have an offer that you're going to make to your customer, it should feel like a gift to them. It should feel like giving them something that they want, that helps their life get better, their job get easier. And so when you craft a CTA or an offer, it should be, in our case, less along the lines of get a demo of Pets R Us and our service. It should feel more like, hey, let's have a conversation about how much better your events will be when you have dogs running around and playing with your prospects. You'll have more leads converted. You'll get more ROI from events, and people will remember it more. And so that's more something that I'll respond to if I'm an event marketer than, hey, I want to sell you something. And so now we've talked about how do we measure the program? How do we decide where to test our first channels? How do we build a compelling offer? So let's continue the act of being a scientist and build a hypothesis for our first experiment. And so now that we have all this stuff, we know where our audience is, we know who we're targeting, we know what our key performance and leading and lagging indicators are. Let's put all this together so that we can create an experiment that has a very clear success criteria. And so what that looks like is we start with an if-then statement, and the if is leading with the insight. If we know event marketers spend time on LinkedIn, since we're doing a LinkedIn ads example, let's go with that. If we know event marketers spend time on LinkedIn, that's an insight. Then we can generate 10 meetings within 2 weeks. 10 meetings is a key performance indicator. If we can get that many meetings within 2 weeks, and I think the time frame is important, then that's meaningful for our business, and that's something we should continue to invest in and scale. If we get 9 meetings, maybe we run it again and see if we can get that last meeting and see if we can get better at this program or try something different. If we get no meetings, then we really need to stop and think about what we're doing. If we get 20 meetings, let's throw gas on the fire and keep going. And so bring it down to the rest of it through LinkedIn ads, promoting our services for having rescue animals at events for engagement. So if we read all that together, if we know event marketers are spending time on LinkedIn, then we generate 10 meetings within 2 weeks through LinkedIn ads, promoting our services for having rescue animals at events for engagement. That whole thing is a complete experiment right there. And so we'll have that. And use that as our way to judge whether something is successful or not. And this is the process. So on the next slide, what we'll talk about is, now that we've done all this setup work, really what growth marketing boils down to is this is a process of doing this process of crafting your hypotheses and experiments, launching your hypotheses and launching your experiments and campaigns, repeating the process. And so you see an image of a Kanban board there. I think that's the best way to organize it, where you've got your idea backlog, all your experiments, then you move it over as you launch and iterate on them. And so that becomes what you do day in and day out. The more you launch, say, testing different value props, different messaging, different channels, different formats, the more you learn and the faster you'll be able to find your winning combination of channels, offers, ways you get leads, and ways you can begin to scale. And so, yeah, that is the quick and dirty, fast crash course version of how to start doing growth marketing for a brand new product. And I'd love to turn it over to George to talk about branding and bring it all together cohesively.
Cool. Thank you so much. So over the past 30 minutes, right, we've gone through a lot of stuff, going from starting out with an initial idea that was probably not a great one, going with the name of that, and then building from there. We pivoted to find that there was actually a better target market, a better fit for what we're trying to offer, and we could build on top of that, and then sort of learned how we could grow it a bit. And along there, we've kind of mentioned a handful of pieces that we may be using, like LinkedIn ads, or sort of other, experiences where someone shows up at one of the booths. What does all that stuff look and feel like? So as part of a lot of kind of early startup foundation, you have to kind of figure out how much branding do you really need. And depending on where you go, or sort of what your company's offering, that could range quite a bit. But generally speaking, you can kind of get away with a logo and consistency. Those are the real big things, right? You want a logo that's going to be something that defines you enough that you can use over and over and over, in a bunch of different places, whether that's online, on a booth, on the product, etc. But more importantly, you need to be consistent with your branding, because having consistency will allow you to create a sort of like a network of trust around every single thing that you actually produce. So if you're actually starting out with, an idea, you can throw some logo together. That's fine. We threw some quick one together for Pets R Us. And, I'm going to show you sort of what you can do to go from there, right? So where do you start? Well, we know that we're aiming for, with our example, right? We know we're aiming for technology companies. We know that we're talking to enterprises, and that we're looking for like conference sponsors. So we can sort of assume that that's our target audience. And using that, you can really build from there about what your target audience would expect to see or would hope to see in a brand that they're going to trust and ultimately put their money behind. So in this quick example, right, we're taking the Pets R Us brand, which originally we were trying to kind of bring birds and cats to startup offices. That was obviously a really bad idea. And we came up with some kind of PowerPoint style logo here to kind of get through. But after pivoting and after kind of realizing that our target market has changed, and that the availability of having an app to actually schedule these things is also going to be a big factor. And looking at, again, our target market being, technology companies, et cetera, we wanted something that was a lot simpler. So, how do we come up with this? This is, a quick 10, 20-minute exercise with asking GPT to help us come up with some names based on what we're trying to do. We put some of those together and we got Tailwag out of it. And then we're using Midjourney here to kind of quickly make an illustration, and then plopping those into Figma, adding some free Google fonts, and kind of putting something together pretty quickly. And the idea here really isn't to focus on like the design of it, but more the choices that were made, right? We're choosing a font that's friendly. We're choosing a name that's short and easy to remember. We're choosing an image that can be used as the logo, but also as the app icon. And then most importantly, the colors are supposed to be calming and like very unassuming, right? So through that, we kind of end up with this new brand. So where does that actually go, right? We talked about some of the LinkedIn ads and some of the experience that you might see online. But the basics of the brand is really going to be your basic logo, a couple of colors that, again, you want to use consistently, a heading font, like the one that we chose, that's sort of this friendly, easy font, and then image styles, which in this case, I just threw in this idea about like Polaroids to make it really feel like these are from real events. And you can see that I kind of checked off a few of the things that we did for this mockup, but the list really goes on, right? So how do you actually know where and what to make? Well, you sort of work backwards, right? Whatever the things are that you're going to be putting out there from a content perspective, from documents like contracts, or even the swag that's going to be part of, in our case, like the harnesses for the dogs. All of that stuff would want to have some sort of cohesive design and usage that's going to communicate well with our target audience. So that brings me to the tone and messaging portion. So a big portion of brand is the actual tone and communication. It's kind of what your brand sounds like to the world. That's the most important and easy way to kind of think about it. And that happens in a bunch of different places, right? That doesn't just happen on your website in the hero. It's how your employees talk to customers. It's how sales calls happen and what those sound like, how aggressive they are. Your email messaging, how that goes, how that's done. Is it one-on-one and personal, or is this huge email blasts, or is it more of newsletters, right, that are communicating in like a friendly and easy way? Social media, obviously, in our case for our dog business here, is going to be a big one, because we really want to communicate that kind of human value back to the whole idea. And then, of course, the event engagement, what people are actually doing at the events, all of that comes back into the tone and messaging of the brand. So again, for our example, in this case, we really want it to be human, confident. Obviously, it's going to be enterprise focused, meaning we're going to use vocab that's going to resonate with people in that sector. It's also service oriented, meaning we want all of the communication to be friendly and aware that we're providing something for somebody. And to that end, we want it to be intentful and trustworthy. So you kind of have now like a quick balance of sort of the tone and messaging versus the kind of graphic portion of what makes up the brand. And then let's quickly talk about the budget versus impact, right? Like, where do you go and how do you actually get started on any of these things? Generally speaking, there's a couple of places that you can go to kind of kick off your brand, or we'll say update your brand based on the pivot that you may have just gone through. You can look at freelance and sort of on Upwork, right? Or then on the other side, you have big agencies. So just quick breakdown here of what you're getting with micro agencies being in between. And if you've never heard of micro agencies, they're a thing that's kind of popped up in the past few years, where it usually is like 2 to 10 people working on very specific types of marketing projects. And usually you get a lot of efficiency out of that. So again, with freelance and Upwork, it's going to be quick. The time scale is going to be fast, right? Hours to days. But the downsides are you're not going to really get much brand consistency between each of the actual things that you need done. And they're not going to treat you necessarily like a partner, right? It's going to be a one-off thing all the time. And if they can't do something that you ask, then that's the end of the road. So there's not really any subcontracting or consulting. If I sort of jump to the opposite end, right, agencies are super expensive, and generally they take a pretty long time, and they like to own the brand as much as possible. So the consistency between what you already had and where you're trying to go is going to be quite rigid. They'll do partnership stuff for a price, and then getting any subcontractors or other disciplines on board, like custom code for some sort of integration, will be done sort of within their house, right? And so in between, one of the options that I'd encourage everyone to check out is micro agencies. They're generally cheaper in cost, but a little bit more than freelancing. They can work quickly on that sort of days to week scale. And I think the biggest thing here is the next two, the flexible and the partnerships, or the brand consistency and the partnership aspect. They really kind of get embedded a bit more like a consultant would with your company, that can really help grow over time. So yeah, so that's kind of like pulling together the brand aspect of what happens when you're actually taking a company and a brand or a name that you started with that doesn't really fit, and try to kind of get it closer to something that is more appropriate. And so with that, I will turn it back to the group. I think we're going to do some Q&A soon, but wanted to quickly just kind of sum up that following this presentation, we're going to be putting together a checklist, a zero to launch checklist that will kind of help summarize a lot of these pieces we kind of went through in the past 40 minutes, and put them together in a format that can be a little bit more easily digestible to sort of work through in that way. Anyone else want to say anything before we hop into the Q&A?
No, yes, thank you everybody for sharing your knowledge and insights. Yeah, hopefully this was helpful for our viewers and listeners.
All right, so let's jump into the chat. Looks like there's already a question there for Lena. Let me pull it up real quick. So when you're thinking about validating your idea, especially like how to find your target audience and tools that are tried and tested, how do you do that? Like, what are the different tools you use to validate your idea with your audience before you've built your MVP or as you're doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to find the audience, right, it's there are a couple of ways to do it. So if you're lucky, obviously, if you've been in the industry for a while, you can leverage your network. You can reach out to your, connections on LinkedIn. And then as you schedule one-on-one interviews, you can ask those people to introduce you to more people who they know, right, that might experience the same problem or that might fit that profile of the people you're looking to connect with. If you don't, let's say you're solving the problem, but you're not really well connected in the industry, I would identify the places online or offline where your target audience congregate, right? It could be Facebook groups, right? Let's say you, targeting construction, general contractors, right? So there might be some conferences that where you can go, where you can connect with those people in person. There might be some groups on, social media, like a Facebook groups, maybe like about the safety for, construction workers. What I also done, I've done a cold outreach on LinkedIn. And I've been using this great auto messaging tool. It's called Meet Alfred. I'm gonna post it here in the LinkedIn chat. Meet Alfred. You can schedule automated outreach campaigns, and I think you need premium account on LinkedIn, so you can create like that custom URL with a filter based on the profiles, and you can set up automated message saying, hey, I'm so and so, I'm a founder at a startup, Pets Are Us. I'm looking, I'm building a product that solves the problem, for this type of clients, and I'd love to connect with people like yourself and ask you a few questions and get your feedback about the product that we're building. So just like being proactively reaching out to those people. And then in terms of the software, there is not much software per se for like to connect with people, right? It's just finding them on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, different Slack groups, Discord groups, in real life. One thing, I'm actually working on the AI product that I'm launching in a couple of weeks called Startup Mentor AI. We will be helping tech founders, innovation teams to take those notes from customer interviews and analyze them and generate go-to-market strategy, provide a summary of analytics, generate your ideal customer profile. So that could be one of the tools that you can leverage to analyze the data.
Gotcha. Thanks, Lena. So it sounds like, sticking with the channels that are available to you, where your audience, where you're guessing your audience lives, trying to reach out to them there through LinkedIn, email, etc. You don't have to necessarily use any fancy tools. It's more about having real one-on-one conversations with them. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's just about doing. And I would say don't stick just to one narrow audience. Try to talk to people from different adjacent audiences that might have similar problem that you're solving, because information that you're going to uncover and what you will learn is really going to be eye-opening, and you're going to uncover a lot of golden nuggets of information. So in the beginning, go broad and talk to a lot of people in different categories that might have that problem. And then you will start identifying like those 5 questions that I mentioned in the beginning, right? Then you can see like which of those people have like really urgent problem, which of those people have high value problem, which of them try to solve it, right? And after that, you'll be able to narrow down your ideal customer profile.
Okay, awesome. Makes sense. So George, there was a question for you on micro agencies. Do you have a rough idea that you could share of pricing?
Yeah, sure. So micro agencies tend to range quite a bit, but usually they're somewhere between kind of like, we'll say 5,000 and 15,000 for the kind of services that they're offering. That typically is, done with a bunch of different options of kind of how you actually want to pay or what sort of relationship you want to have. So like for mine with BrandsApp, we offer a couple of different ones where you can sort of do 50% upfront, like a typical agency would, or sort of monthly payments along the way so that the schedule can be less defined or the scope can be less defined. I think that's the big thing that really sets apart micro agencies from a lot of either freelancers or agencies, is that the scope is fairly set. It's like, this is what we're doing. This is how long it's going to take. This is the delivery date, and kind of go. And then you make your big payment and you're off. But micro agencies a lot of times have kind of sprung up out of sort of startup environments and work on agile cycles, or will be just flexible with, releasing things as they go or waiting for scope to come as it's needed. So it's a way of kind of combining like that retainer model versus like a typical agency thing. So yeah, it depends on kind of what it is. For like a brand update or a new brand, I would say it's somewhere between like 3,000 and 8,000, and that's going to include like every piece of things that you may not have even thought of, right? Like all the stuff that goes in from MailChimp to LinkedIn banners, so like all the things. And then, if you're tacking on other assets or other pieces like a marketing site or kind of like a HubSpot overhaul or something like that, then you're looking at, adding another 5 or 10, depending on the scope or what's needed, how integrated it is with your product, et cetera. So yeah, a little bit of a range, but I'd say that's kind of the ballpark, is the low, high 4 digits, low 5 digits.
Got it. So really depending on the scope, and then compared to a traditional agency, kind of more flexible, more relationship focused.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
There's another question in the chat that says, from Kofi, saying, hey, it's good to start with a niche, smaller market that's a subset of the larger market you want to address. And then when you start, you go 100% in on the niche in terms of messaging, landing page, etc. And then over time, you create a more general landing page and messaging. Does that alienate the first customers? So great question. I definitely agree that when you start off, you want to have a very tight niche and then expand over time. So aligned with you there 100%. As far as when you go more general or when you expand to different niches, I don't think it alienates your first customers, because they start developing a relationship with you and they start understanding how you work. If you sell, let's just take cars as an example. If you sell, let's see, Toyota Corolla, right? And you're selling your Toyota Corolla and you're going after people who are really safety conscious because the Corolla is extremely safe, 5-star crash safety across the board, so on and so forth. And that's what your entire pitch is, right? You're going after, again, making this up, but let's say moms in the Midwest, safety conscious, so on and so forth. So all of your messaging, your landing page, your website, your sales collateral, your even at the dealerships, like the posters, everything emphasizes safety. You nail that audience and people start to figure out, okay, great, Toyota is associated with safety. There's nothing wrong with, 2 years later, 3 years later, and B2C, it usually moves, or B2B usually moves slower. But let's say a few years later, to expanding that to say, hey, we're actually now going to brand a little, or talk a little bit more about, let me think, long lasting, right? Longevity and value, right? So now you're not necessarily going after the safety concerned moms. Now you're changing your niche to, let's say, entire US. Now you're focused more on younger folks who are really buying for the long haul. They want to drive this till the end of the day, or to the end of the life of that vehicle. So that's not going to alienate the initial target audience. It's just going to be a supplementary or an additional value. Sunder, I saw your question about specific advice for B2B startup versus consumer. Can you explain more specifically what you're asking for?
In the meantime, I have another one for Tyler.
Yeah.
So how do you know when to pull the plug on one of the experiments that you're running versus, say, pivot to another one?
Yeah. So that's why it's really important to set the criteria at the beginning for how long you're going to run a test, and also determine success criteria. I always have stop criteria in place for, if let's say we're running an ad campaign and we spend $200 and it's just way off, nothing's happening, and we expected to get at least a couple clicks or maybe one form fill by then. And so from a standpoint of trying to preserve budget and make sure that we don't blow it all chasing the wrong kind of audience or sending the exact wrong message that we thought we had confidence in, and turns out this ad channel disagrees with it. That's kind of the thing you want to have at the beginning, so that you're not making kind of a gut decision as you're peeking at the results while the experiment's mid-flight and saying, hey, it's not performing as well as I want it. Let's turn it off and try something different. But basically the guidance is that I always give is decide at the beginning what good looks like, how long you're going to run an experiment, which usually aligns to how long your sales process is or how long it takes for you to hit key performance metrics. Run it for that long, but make sure nothing's wrong with your experiment. Make sure nothing's broken. And then when you get to the end of that process, you can say, okay, that didn't work. Let's change something, or let's move on and try something different. All right.
All right. Looks like there's a question from Kofi. So you mentioned in the curl example, would you message for Midwestern mothers, like not safety niche, but targeting those mothers by talking about problems with carrying kids in the car, et cetera? Yeah, 100%. I mean, in the first place, like that would be for that first niche, that would definitely be the talk track, and that would be the messaging, that would be everywhere, for sure. And then as you expanded to, value-based, long-lasting, reliable, you would change those kind of examples, those use cases, and focus more on, hey, this is the car that you're passing down from, father to son, or, mother to daughter, so on and so forth. So you could change the elements over time. Maybe it becomes less about carrying, having your kids in the car and it being a safe place, or safe car. Maybe it becomes more about, hey, your car is so long lasting that now, you show them first as young, and now they're going off to college and they're taking your Corolla with them. So I think you can massage the message and kind of extend it over time for sure.
Awesome. We have another one here. This one's for Lena. How much detail is needed for the initial MVP of the app?
I would say it's important to pick maybe like 2-3 top features that you want to deliver to the customers, and just focus on those, right? Don't build out like the whole fully blown out solution, because it's going to take you a lot of time and money. And again, now you run into the risk of building something that does not resonate with your customers. Like pick like few features that will be the core, will deliver that core value to your customers. Release it, get the feedback, test it out, and then you can start adding more to it, because it's better to launch small and lean and then keep adding more than wait too long and again like miss that mark at the end. So and again, to determine what would be those core features that provide value to the customers, you can get it through, by talking to the customers. You can send out the surveys. So like that would be a great example, when you can send surveys with different questions, and maybe you have 10 features that you're thinking of adding to your application, right? You can ask people to rank those features from the most important to them to the least important, or instead of features, focus on the value, like the problem that you're going to solve for them, right? And then features will come later, right? But you can get the feedback from people to see what's important for them, and then decide what you can deliver for your MVP. So, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just it have to be stable enough to work, and people understand that MVPs can be full of bugs and they, not super pretty. But as long as it gets the job done and people get value out of it, that's what you want to focus on.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I think we're coming up on time here, so I'm gonna wrap us up. I want to first say thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is our first time doing this together as the four of us, and I think I'm going to say it was 98% successful, which is fantastic. So that's great. Before we all hop off, let's just go through real quick and say where we can find. You can follow everybody. So, Lena, you want to give an overview of where we can find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn, send me a connection request here. You can also send me an email at lena@forcoda.com. So yeah, would love to connect.
Awesome. Tyler, how about you?
Sure. Yeah, same thing here. Find me on LinkedIn, Tyler Derman. And also, if you want to reach out to me directly, you can write me at tyler@ignitiongrowth.co.
All right. And on my end, LinkedIn is great. You can also email me at jonathan@bluemanticconsulting.com. And if you're looking for mentoring, maybe you're a product marketer that looking for some guidance, I do free mentoring and paid mentoring on adplist.org.
Cool. Awesome. And myself, I'm George Little. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's pretty much the only social platform I use. Or at brandsapp.xyz. Just head over there and talk to my AI chatbot. Give it a shot. See if it's working for you or not. Yeah. Anyway, thanks so much, everybody. And we'll see you soon.